Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. My name is Adam. You can refer to me as he, him, and I'm going to be your host today. And joining me alongside me is
Hello, I'm Stuart Deville. I am co-host today.
hello Stuart. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. I'm excited for another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. And in this episode of the Game Dev London podcast, today we're going to be talking about prototypes. We're going to be talking about proof of concepts. We're going to talk about MVPs, and we're going to be talking about vertical slices and the difference between all four of those. Are you excited, Stu?
How could I be? How could I be less excited?
Okay, well
it's stuff that is important to all developers, so it'll be good.
let's get started then. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is that I recently had some conversations with some friends of mine who have been talking to people. They do game jams, they make games, they want to get out there and talk to people about their idea they got. Sometimes they have really cool ideas for mechanics and they're going, oh, I just want to showcase it. Sometimes they're out there talking to publishers and that kind of thing who they want to see more of what they're working on. And sometimes, and I'm also talking to students who sometimes get a bit confused about all these different terms. People hear MVP, some people will automatically think most valuable professional, and they don't understand how that relates to a game. Some people will hear prototype and don't know when does that start, when does that stop. And some people haven't heard of vertical slice before and just hope it means more cake. And so what I wanted to do was have a chat about the four of them, why they're important, where they're relevant, and come into it. But before we sort of dive into that, what's been your experience, Stu, with sort of just in general, just kind of working on sort of early stage ideas, coming up with concepts and turning them into things?
Yeah, I mean, so at my studio, we obviously, I say obviously, it's not obvious at all, but we started with my idea concept, which really just started out as something floating around in my brain, and then we went into pre-production, and then which was just basically us talking about the idea that I had in my head, and then we got to prototype, and now we're working on vertical slice. So yeah, it's and I guess even when I've been having these discussions with members of my team, some of them have been like, "So, what does that mean?"
That's a big part of it. It's one of those one of those terminologies. I mean, they're all that kind of terminology where until you sort of come across it, you may not know what it is, and you may not feel like you can ask about it. And somebody could go, especially if you're in a bigger company, someone comes around and goes, "Oh, how's work going on the vertical slice?" And you go, "It's good." It's good, and then you show it to them, and they're like, "That's not what a vertical slice is." And if you don't, go and research it, and even then, there are conflicting opinions. It's the same as other topics I'm not going to mention because I've realized if I say them, I'm going to start a fight. But other topics where people say something means one thing or it means something else, and people aren't really sure. So it's going to be useful to sort of have a breakdown. So my plan is basically what I'm going to do is first I'm going to outline what I think the order is in terms of scale size, and then Stuart can tell me if I'm wrong. And then we're going to work through each one and talk about, where we've seen it happen, where it might be relevant, where it's important, the gap and the sort of the boundaries at which you start to cross over from one to the other. And why it's important not to cross over from one to the other, or is important depending on what you're doing. So from my perspective, you start off with your proof of concept. You're just sort of demonstrating the idea. We'll talk about that, proof of concept. Then you move into your prototype phase. And then usually you'd move into your vertical slice phase. And then after that, you'd move into an MVP. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah.
Cool. Now I'm going to explain what they are. Because everyone at home's going, that doesn't help me. I don't know what that means. So starting off, we'll start with the proof of concept. So proof of concept basically means you've come up with something that you think is cool, interesting, an idea, a story, a mechanic, whatever it might be. But you want to demonstrate the fact that it is cool, right? In your head, you're playing it on a PS5 and, it's the best thing ever and it's made you £1 million. But actually in the physical world, no one knows what that is yet. So you've got to prove the concept. You've got to explain to people in a way that they can get on board with it and try it out. So for me, like an example, one of my favorite examples of this is the game Superhot, where they had an idea, very simple idea, time only moves when you do, which sounds amazing, right? Someone goes to you, time only moves when you do, and you go, oh, what does that mean? And so they had to prove it. They had to prove the concept. And they did the 7-day first-person shooter jam many years ago. And their first ever piece of work it started as a proof of concept where it begins going, just showcase to someone this mechanic. So in that situation, it'd be something like when you're moving, there are things moving around you and they all stop moving when you stand still and they move when you move. And that's it. Doesn't need to go beyond that. We're not talking the shooting or the characters. We're not talking anything that goes beyond proving the core idea. And that's an important thing when it comes to proof of concept. Once you've proven the core concept and just the core concept working in its purest basis form, you don't need to go beyond that. Now, obviously, that could change depending on what that concept is. If it's narrative, trying to prove the concept of your narrative idea is going to be a lot more difficult. You're going to have to get to complexities of character communication. You're going to have to tell the story and do something with it. Whereas something that's mechanics-based, all you really need to do is make the mechanic, which is easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to something like multiplayer, that could still involve a lot of development before it even gets to that stage. But all you're trying to do is demonstrate that kind of concept. Now, have you come across have you had any instances where you've been doing that, Stu, where you've had ideas and you try to prove them?
Yeah, so again, I think the thing was at my studio, because I had this idea and I thought it was a cool concept, a cool story idea. And the way that I tested that was I literally went and spoke to as many people as I could who understood this kind of thing and went, does that sound cool to you? Am I just mad? Like, this is a cool thing, right? We should make this, right? And obviously I got enough people going, yeah, absolutely, that I went, okay, let's start building it up.
You actually bring up a good point there, and you know what? Even I had forgotten about this, and this demonstrates how weird this topic gets. Is that alongside the proof of concept and already messing up my order of things is a paper prototype. Now, a paper prototype is very similar to a proof of concept because point of a paper prototype is to prove the idea of what you're making using paper, which may sound slightly strange. The idea is that if you can make it physically and demonstrate it, so for example, say you have an idea for a fantastic new card game. If you can write it on bits of paper, the numbers, the stats, whatever, just get it out there in some kind of scribbled, drawn-on fashion that allows you to play the game to test the mechanics and demonstrate it, then you've got something good if you can play it on paper and it still works. This is also true for Lego prototypes. A lot of people will use Lego as a means for level design. Build it up in Lego, see the dynamics, lines of sight, will it work like this, etc., etc. These all fit. These are sort of blur the line between your concept and your proof of concept and your prototype stage. They're sort of in that gap in between the two of them. But
they're kind of a pretotype.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to add a new term in here. Coined today, Game Dev London first. Pretotype.
I know that I didn't coin this. It does exist out there.
Pretotype is now coined by us. We have now.
But yeah, I mean, so yes, we did a paper. I just lost the words.
Pretotype.
We did a paper pretotype ourselves, just because we thought that the game was going to be fun to play, and the programming was yet to kind of get underway. So we were like, well, let's create it. So I got a bit of paper out. We did. It just so happened we used a grid system, and then I got some 2p coins, which actually I think might even be. Are they still here? Yeah. I got some 2p coins, and this is a sticker. I cut out stickers and stuck it on all of the 2p coins. The Queen is going to kill me. And then we used those as the tokens for the characters. And we used an app on our phones that people use for D&D for health, and you can just take down health every time you lose health on your character. And by the end of the day, I was like, this was really fun. I'm so glad. And it just proved that it was what we thought it was.
And that's a huge part of it, actually, the fun aspect, right? Because one of the things that people lose a lot of is they lose track of what they thought was meant to be good about it. And one of the things that this helps with is helps you sort of reduce the idea of your game down to its core concept, the bit that is fun, the absolute basis of it, and then you can stick everything to that once you go forward. Once you know what it is that's fun, once you've got an idea of this is the bit that's people are going to enjoy, then you don't need to push beyond that. You can build your game up going, as long as we stick to that core thing and can go back to that core thing, then we know it's fun. An example of this is we made a game a while back now called Antiphase, which when we started was quite pure. And when it started, it was a game jam game where you were sort of you use sound waves basically to destabilize enemies and then destroy them. But one of the best things about it was that you had a physical force push wave that basically you'd push an enemy and smash them into a wall and they'd blow up into 1,000 particles. And that was fun. No matter what else we did was fun. And as we developed the game, we got distracted by a lot of feedback. We took on advice from people who, just general public and that kind of thing. And we did a lot of changes to the game, and it absolutely lost its way. But the thing was that we knew when we realized this, we realized that we had to stop development and either go backwards or do something else. The thing that was fun was that physicality of it. And actually, we took that. What we ended up doing was taking it out of the game and making an entirely new game, which was all about physicality. Which we got a lot further with, and we got to a much further position, because it's just, once you've got that core concept that is really fun, you can do so much with it, but also keeping it pure. Even if you add lots of layers and development, as long as that's the key of it. You think about games like Overcooked, right? The frantic nature of trying to cook the food, and the arguments between you and your friends, and you and your ex friends, if you've played Overcooked with them, is the core of that game, and that is fun, right? End of the day, and no matter how many levels there are, multiplayer, competitive, co-op, moving platforms, whatever, that core is always there and is always fun, and that's why it sticks around, and that's why all the game, no matter what, that exists at the proof of concept stage, at the pre-prototype, the paper prototype, the Lego prototype, whatever stage, that will exist.